12-year-old Elliot Grayson and his best friend Maya Lopez live in Harbor City, a once thriving metropolis now filled with forgotten places and hidden secrets. When Elliot's father, a detective, is falsely accused of stealing an important artifact, the Silver Falcon, Elliot and Maya must prove his innocence. With the help of an eccentric group of misfits, including a retired detective and a talking parrot named Rascal, they embark on an adventure to uncover the truth, unraveling a conspiracy that runs deeper than they ever imagined. Chapter 1: The Broken Clock. Elliot and Maya stood at the base of the old clock tower, their breath visible in the crisp autumn air. The tower loomed over them, its weathered facade cracked and peeling, whispering tales of a forgotten past. The townspeople spoke of ghosts, of strange occurrences that made even the bravest hesitate before setting foot inside. But for Elliot and Maya, the legend was nothing more than an excuse to investigate. "Are you sure about this?" Maya asked, her fingers tightening around the flashlight in her hand. "People say weird things happen here," Elliot smirked. "That's exactly why we're here. Come on, aren't you curious?" He pushed open the heavy wooden door with a groan. The scent of dust and decay rushed out to greet them. The dim light of the late afternoon barely penetrated the gloom inside. Cobwebs clung to the rafters, and the floor creaked beneath their tentative steps. The clock above them had long stopped working, its hands frozen at 2:17. No one in town could remember the last time it had chimed, and no one dared climb to its upper chambers. Elliot felt a strange pull towards it, as if something within the tower was calling to him. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing against the stone walls. Old furniture sat abandoned, papers scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. As Maya swept her flashlight across the walls, a glint of metal caught her eye. "Look at this," she said, stepping forward. A rusted key lay atop a wooden table, beside what appeared to be an old ledger. Elliot picked up the key, weighing it in his hand. It felt oddly warm, as if someone had held it moments before. His eyes scanned the walls and then fell upon something odd, a faint outline in the stone, like a doorway that had been sealed away. "Help me look for something that might open this," Elliot said, excitement creeping into his voice. Maya sighed, but she began searching the room nonetheless. Within minutes, she found a small indentation in the stone, perfectly sized for the key. "Here goes nothing," Elliot muttered, fitting the key into place. He turned it, and with a grating sound, the hidden door creaked open, revealing a narrow passageway. Maya shone her flashlight inside. "This is insane. What is this doing here?" They stepped into the passage, finding themselves in a hidden room lined with shelves, each stacked with old case files and yellowed newspaper clippings. A thick layer of dust coated everything, undisturbed for decades. Elliot's eyes roamed the shelves until they landed on a newspaper clipping pinned to the far wall. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the headline: "Local man accused of embezzlement and disappearance, case unsolved." The grainy photograph below the title showed a familiar face, his father. Maya saw the color drain from his face. Elliot? What is it? His fingers trembled as he pulled the clipping from the wall. This is about my dad, but this doesn't make sense. He never told me anything about this. Maya peered over his shoulder. Are you sure it's him? Yes, Elliot whispered. This says he was accused of stealing money from the town's treasury and then disappearing. But that's not true. He never disappeared. He was always with us. His mind raced. His father had always been quiet about his past, but never had Elliot imagined something like this. If these files had been hidden away, did it mean someone had wanted to bury the truth? Before he could say another word, a loud crack echoed through the chamber. The floor beneath them groaned. Dust rained from the ceiling. Elliot, we need to get out of here. Maya grabbed his arm. The wood beneath their feet splintered. With a deafening crash, the floor gave way, and they plunged into darkness. Elliot hit the ground hard, pain jolting through his body. Maya landed beside him, groaning as she pushed herself up. Are you okay? He gasped. Yeah, but that was too close, she breathed. She pointed upward. We fell at least 15 feet. How do we get out? Elliot scanned their surroundings. They had fallen into another hidden chamber, this one much older, with stone walls covered in moss. At the far end of the room, a faint light flickered. He helped Maya up, and they cautiously approached. A wooden desk stood against the wall, covered in more files and a single unlit lantern. Elliot picked it up and turned the knob. To his surprise, the flame ignited, casting a warm glow over the chamber. Maya picked up a dusty journal from the desk. Elliot, look at this. She flipped open the cover. The first page was filled with handwritten notes, but one entry stood out. I have hidden the truth, but I fear they will come looking. If you find this, know that I never ran away. The evidence was destroyed, and the truth buried beneath the clock tower. Elliot's breath caught. Who wrote this? Could it be about my dad? Maya flipped another page. There was no name, but the handwriting seemed rushed, urgent. A sudden gust of air sent a shiver down Elliot's spine. The lantern flickered. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. We have to go, Maya urged. Now! They scanned the chamber, spotting a rusted ladder leading up. Elliot hoisted himself onto the rungs, his heart pounding as he climbed. Maya followed close behind. At the top, they found themselves back in the main hall of the tower. The moment Maya pulled herself up, the floor below gave another sickening creak and collapsed entirely, swallowing the secret chamber in dust and darkness. That was way too close, Maya coughed. Elliot held up the newspaper clipping. But we found something that wasn't meant to be found. Maya nodded. So what now? Elliot glanced back at the tower one last time, the frozen hands of the broken clock looming above them. Now we find out the truth. Chapter 2. A Father's Secret. Elliot sat across from his father at the large wooden dining table, his fingers tapping anxiously against the polished surface. The air between them was heavy, thick with unspoken words and tension that had been simmering for years. Elliot had always respected his father, but tonight that respect was eclipsed by something else. Suspicion. "Dad," Elliot started, his voice steady but probing, "I need you to tell me the truth." Across the table, Harold Carter sighed, his graying temples illuminated by the soft glow of the chandelier. "Elliot, I don't know what you're talking about." Elliot leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The case. The one you were involved in before you retired. The one that ruined a man's life." His father's face darkened, the usual warmth in his eyes replaced with something cold and unreadable. "Drop it, Elliot." "But I said drop it!" Harold's voice boomed through the room, making Elliot flinch. A thick silence followed, only interrupted by the faint ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Elliot clenched his fists. "Why? Why won't you talk about it? You were the lead investigator, weren't you? You sent an innocent man to prison." Harold shook his head. "You don't know what you're saying." Elliot stood up, anger and frustration boiling over. "Then tell me, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you buried evidence that could have exonerated him." His father exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "You think it's that simple? That case, it wasn't clean. There were things I couldn't prove, and there were people involved that were more powerful than you realize." Elliot's heart pounded. "Then help me. If there's more to the story, I want to find the truth." Harold locked eyes with him, his expression grave. "I'm warning you, son. Stay away from this. There are people who don't want the truth to come out." Elliot's stomach twisted. "Are you afraid of them?" His father didn't answer. He simply got up, leaving the room without another word. Outside, the crisp night air did little to cool Elliot's frustration. Maya stood by his car, arms crossed, watching him closely. "Well?" she asked. Elliot shook his head. "He won't talk, but he knows something." Maya sighed. "We need another angle. Someone else who knows about the case." Elliot thought for a moment before nodding. "I know just the person." The next morning, Elliot and Maya drove to a quiet suburban neighborhood lined with modest houses. They pulled up in front of a small, well-kept home with a porch swing and wind chimes that tinkled in the breeze. "This is where he lives?" Maya asked, eyeing the place skeptically. "Yeah, retired Detective Calloway," Elliot said, stepping out of the car. "He worked under my dad when the case went down." They knocked, and after a few moments the door creaked open. A tall, wiry man with silver hair and tired eyes peered out at them. "Elliot Carter," the man said, his voice rough but sharp. "Didn't think I'd ever see you on my doorstep." "Mr. Calloway," Elliot greeted him. "Can we talk?" Calloway's eyes flickered to Maya before he sighed. "Depends on what you're here for." "The case, the one my father worked on years ago. I need to know what really happened." Calloway's jaw tightened, and for a moment it seemed like he would refuse. But then he stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the living room smelled of old books and coffee. Calloway led them to a worn-out couch, then sank into an armchair with a heavy sigh. "I should have known this case would come back to haunt me," he muttered. "What do you mean?" Maya asked. Calloway rubbed his chin. "Your father was a damn good detective, but that case, it wasn't handled right. Evidence went missing. Witnesses changed their statements overnight. And the higher-ups?" He scoffed. "They were too eager to close the case." Elliot leaned forward. "So you believe the wrong man was convicted?" Calloway gave him a long, hard look. "I don't just believe it, I know it." Maya's eyes widened. "Then why didn't you do anything?" Calloway shook his head. "Because we were warned, your father and I both. We got too close to something dangerous and we were told to back off, or else." Elliot felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who threatened you?" Calloway exhaled, looking at the window as if expecting someone to be watching. "I don't know their names, but they were powerful. They had connections to people higher up, politicians, businessmen, even law enforcement." Maya exchanged a glance with Elliot. "So the real thief is still out there?" Calloway nodded grimly. "Not just out there. He's untouchable. And if you go digging, you might not like what you find." Elliot swallowed hard, but his resolve only strengthened. "Then I guess we better start digging." Calloway sighed. "You're just like your father. Stubborn." Then he stood up and walked over to a small cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. "If you're going to do this, you need to know everything." Elliot took the folder, his pulse quickening as he flipped through the pages. Names, photographs, reports, pieces of a puzzle that had been kept hidden for too long. "Be careful," Calloway warned. "Once you start down this path, there's no turning back." Elliot met his gaze. "I don't plan on turning back." Chapter 3. The Message in the Alley. Maya had walked past the alley 100 times before without a second glance. It was just another shadowy crease in the city's architecture, wedged between a shuttered laundromat and a condemned diner. But today was different. Today something tugged at her curiosity, drawing her into the narrow passage where the scent of damp brick and old garbage mingled with the metallic tang of something she couldn't quite place. Her steps slowed as her gaze landed on the far wall. What should have been a blank, graffiti-streaked surface was now marked with something else. A cryptic, almost artistic arrangement of symbols and numbers. Some were smudged, others etched deep as though carved with precision. It wasn't the usual street tag or gang insignia. No, this was something deliberate, something meant to be read. Maya stepped closer, brushing her fingers over the raised surface of the wall. The message wasn't random. It followed a pattern. Her mind, always attuned to puzzles and codes, kicked into high gear. She reached for her phone, snapping a picture before pulling out her notebook and beginning to copy the symbols. 13.19.1.259.191, 12.9.22.5 numbers. At first glance, they didn't make sense. But she had seen this kind of encryption before. Simple, yet effective. a substitution cipher. Each number represented a letter, their positions in the alphabet. Her heart pounded as she quickly translated them. Maya is alive. A chill ran down her spine. She inhaled sharply, scanning the alley for movement. There was no one else here, just the silent testimony of the message on the wall. How did someone know she would come this way? And more importantly, who needed to remind her that she was alive? The implication of the phrase unsettled her. She looked again, deeper. There was more. Beneath the first set of numbers, another line of characters had been hastily scrawled. 53 degree 23, 12, and 1 degree 28, 56 W coordinates. Someone was leading her somewhere. Her fingers trembled slightly as she fed the numbers into her phone's map app. The result appeared almost instantly. A location not far from here. A place she recognized. An old pawn shop. The bell above the shop door jingled as Maya stepped inside. The air smelled of aged wood and forgotten treasures. The kind of place where every object held a story. Shelves lined with dusty trinkets and glass cases filled with oddities surrounded her, each piece waiting for a new owner, or perhaps hiding from one. Behind the counter stood a man who seemed as much a relic as the items he sold. Silas Finch. The nameplate on the counter confirmed it, but Maya had heard of him before. An eccentric man, rumored to deal in more than just forgotten heirlooms. Some said he was a broker of secrets, a keeper of things that were best left undiscovered. Silas studied her with pale, sharp eyes that carried an unsettling depth. He wore a dark vest over a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hands, long and bony, rested lightly on the counter. "You've come sooner than I expected," he said, his voice smooth, laced with something unreadable. Maya's lips parted slightly. "You were expecting me?" He nodded toward the door. "That message in the alley. Whoever left it wanted you here." "Who?" she demanded. Silas exhaled, tapping his fingers against the countertop. "That, my dear, is the real question. But perhaps a better one is, what is it they want you to find?" Maya's hands clenched at her sides. "You know something?" A knowing smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "I know many things, but let's focus on the one that brought you here. Come." He turned, leading her through a beaded curtain at the back of the shop. The room beyond was dim, illuminated only by a single stained glass lamp casting fragmented colors across the wooden floor. Shelves stacked with books, lockboxes, and unmarked envelopes lined the walls. He gestured to an antique writing desk where an old leather-bound journal sat waiting. "This was left for you," he said. Maya hesitated before stepping forward. The journal's cover was worn, its edges frayed from age and handling. When she opened it, the first page bore a single phrase in the same precise script as the message in the alley. "The truth is waiting, but so are they." Her breath caught. "Who are they?" Silas's expression darkened. "You're about to find out." Chapter 4. The Missing Silver Falcon. Elliot's heart pounded as he and Maya sat in front of the flickering security footage. The grainy video showed the museum's back corridor, dimly lit by emergency lights. A shadowy figure in a long trench coat moved stealthily along the hallway, pausing briefly at the vault's entrance. Then, with practiced precision, the figure bypassed the security system and disappeared inside. Maya leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "It could be anyone, right?" she asked, though her voice lacked conviction. Elliot's stomach churned. The resemblance was undeniable. The figure's height, build, and even the way they moved, it all looked eerily like his father. He clenched his fists. "It can't be him," he muttered, shaking his head. "It doesn't make sense." The night his father had been arrested, the authorities had focused on financial misconduct. Embezzlement, they had claimed. There had been no mention of a theft. Yet now, staring at the footage, another story began to unfold. Maya rewound the tape, playing the scene again. What exactly was stolen? Elliot exhaled sharply. "The Silver Falcon." Maya turned to him, eyes wide. "Wait, the Silver Falcon? The artifact your dad was researching?" Elliot nodded. His father, Dr. Henry Sinclair, had dedicated years to studying the Silver Falcon, an ancient artifact believed to hold mystical properties. It had been kept under high security at the city's History Museum, protected by state-of-the-art alarms. Yet, the footage showed that someone who looked just like his father, had taken it. "This has to be a setup," Elliot insisted. "There's no way my dad would steal it." Maya bit her lip, deep in thought. If this footage was never brought up during his arrest, it means someone didn't want it linked to the case. Elliot's mind raced. Why would someone frame his father? And why was this footage only surfacing now? Determined to find answers, they decided to visit the museum. It had been closed for renovations since the theft, but Maya had a connection. Her aunt, a curator, still had access to certain archives. Under the cover of dusk, they made their way to the museum's employee entrance. Maya's aunt, a no-nonsense woman named Evelyn, let them in after Maya explained their purpose. "I don't like this," Evelyn murmured as she led them down a quiet hallway. "Digging into things that should be left alone, it never ends well." "We just need to see the vault," Elliot said. "Please." Evelyn hesitated before finally leading them to the crime scene. The vault's steel door loomed before them, its locking mechanisms now inactive. Elliot ran a hand over the cold surface, imagining the night of the theft. He turned to Maya. "We need to see the official police report." Evelyn sighed. "I can't help with that, but I do know someone who might." She handed them a name and an address. Detective Adrian Graves, a retired officer who had been part of the original investigation. The next day they tracked him down at a small bookstore he now owned. Graves was a grizzled man with sharp eyes that studied them carefully as they explained their quest. "You're Henry Sinclair's kid," he muttered after they finished. "I remember your father's case." "You didn't investigate the theft?" Maya asked. Graves scoffed. "Wasn't allowed to." Orders came from above. Focus on the embezzlement, ignore the missing artifact. Never sat right with me. Elliot's pulse quickened. Then you think my father was framed? Graves hesitated before nodding. I always had my suspicions, but by the time I got access to any evidence, it was too late. He leaned forward. The real question is, who wanted the Silver Falcon so badly they were willing to destroy your father to get it? Elliot and Maya exchanged a glance. That was the mystery they needed to solve. Before they left, Graves handed Elliot a small, weathered notebook. Your father kept this at the station before he was taken in. I don't know what's in it, but it might help. Elliot turned the pages, his father's familiar handwriting scrawled across them. Among the notes, one phrase stood out, circled multiple times. The falcon's shadow. Maya read over his shoulder. What does it mean? Elliot clenched the notebook. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Chapter 5. A Parrot Knows the Truth. The pawn shop smelled of old wood and tarnished metal, the air thick with dust and the scent of forgotten things, shelves brimmed with trinkets, watches that no longer ticked, cameras that had captured their last images, and jewelry dulled by years of neglect. The dim light from the stained glass window cast an eerie glow, making every object seem like it held a secret of its own. Maya and Elliot stepped inside cautiously, their eyes scanning the cluttered store. Behind the counter, a wiry old man with deep lines across his face polished a brass candlestick. He looked up and gave them a slow, measured glance before returning to his work. What can I do for you? He asked, his voice raspy. We're looking for information, Elliot said. Something specific. The old man snorted. People come here for deals, not stories. Maya took a step closer to the counter. We're hoping you can help us decipher something. Maybe you've come across something like it before. Before the man could reply, a sharp voice interrupted. Silver lies where broken things sleep. They turned in unison to see a large green parrot perched on a wooden stand near the register. The bird cocked its head, its beady black eyes studying them intently. Silver lies where broken things sleep, the parrot repeated. Maya's pulse quickened. Where did he learn that? The shopkeeper sighed. That's Rascal. He's been saying that nonsense ever since he came here. Where did you get him? Elliot asked. The old man set down the candlestick. Couple weeks back, a man pawned him off. Didn't say much, just that he needed quick cash. Looked real nervous, though. Do you remember what he looked like? Maya pressed. Dark coat, hat pulled low, didn't want to be seen. Left in a hurry. Maya exchanged a glance with Elliot. They had been chasing the whereabouts of a stolen silver artifact for weeks now, and the parrot's words seemed too coincidental to ignore. What else does Rascal say? Elliot asked. The shopkeeper shrugged. Just that one phrase, over and over. Drove me mad at first, but now I barely notice. Maya moved closer to Rascal, her voice gentle. Hey there, Rascal. Can you say it again? The parrot fluffed its feathers and stared at her. Then, slowly, in its eerie, human-like tone, it repeated, Silver lies where broken things sleep. Elliot frowned. Broken things. A junkyard? A repair shop? Maya tapped her fingers against the counter. Or maybe an old building in ruins. The old man smirked. Plenty of those around here. But if you want my guess, check the abandoned rail yard outside town. Nothing but rusted metal and shattered glass out there. Have you ever seen the man who pawned Rascal near that area? Elliot asked. The shopkeeper shook his head. No clue, but if Rascal knows something, you might as well take him with you. Maya hesitated. You'd just give him to us? The old man chuckled. Consider it a trade. You take the bird and I get some peace and quiet. Rascal let out a sharp squawk. Silver lies where broken things sleep. Maya sighed. I guess we have a new team member. With the parrot perched on Elliot's shoulder, they left the shop and stepped onto the sunlit street, the mystery deepening with every repetition of Rascal's cryptic phrase. Chapter 6. The Secret Beneath Harbor City. Elliot and Maya hurried through the dimly lit alleyway, their footsteps echoing off the damp walls. Rascal's latest clue had led them to a seemingly abandoned building near the docks. The old brick structure, weathered by time and salt air, had an eerie silence hanging over it. This is it, Elliot whispered, studying the faded markings on the wall. He ran his fingers over the chipped brick, feeling for anything unusual. Rascal said something about a hidden passage. Maya stepped closer, her sharp eyes scanning the area. If there's a tunnel here, it has to be underground. Look for any signs of an entrance. They split up, carefully inspecting the surroundings. The rusted remnants of a fire escape clung precariously to the side of the building. Nearby, old wooden crates sat stacked against a metal door, their surfaces slick with moisture. Then Maya noticed a faint groove in the cobblestone beneath her feet. "Elliot, over here!" she called. He rushed over, and together they cleared away the debris, revealing a heavy iron grate. Elliot knelt, gripping the rusted handle, and with a grunt pulled it open. A gust of musty air rushed up from the dark tunnel below. Maya wrinkled her nose. Smells like centuries of dust. Elliot shone his flashlight into the depths. The tunnel stretched into darkness, its stone walls lined with remnants of old wiring and pipes. Only one way to find out where it leads. With cautious steps, they descended into the passage, the air growing cooler as they moved deeper underground. The walls narrowed slightly, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed around them. After several minutes, they emerged into a vast chamber, an abandoned train station buried beneath the city. Rusting tracks stretched out in both directions, disappearing into the darkness. The station's ceiling arched high above, its once grand chandeliers now reduced to cobweb-covered husks. Decayed benches lined the platform, and old posters clung stubbornly to the walls, advertising events from decades past. "This is incredible," Maya breathed. "A whole station just forgotten." Elliot nodded, scanning their surroundings. Then his eyes caught something. An old maintenance room, its door slightly ajar. "Let's check in there." They pushed inside, their flashlights revealing a cluttered space filled with rusted tools and yellowed maps. Maya rifled through a drawer, pulling out a set of blueprints. Look at this. These aren't just for the station, they show tunnels. Lots of them, spreading beneath Harbor City. Elliot leaned over the plans, tracing a path with his finger. These tunnels connect to places all over the city. Some of them are marked with symbols. See this? That's the city archives. And this one, it's beneath City Hall. Maya frowned. This isn't just an old transport system. Someone built these tunnels for a reason. Elliot flipped through more pages, his heart pounding. And whoever made these maps didn't want them found. A sudden noise made them both freeze. Footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind them. "We're not alone," Maya whispered. Elliot quickly stuffed the blueprints into his backpack. "We need to move. Now." They slipped out of the maintenance room, keeping to the shadows. The echoes of their unknown pursuer grew closer. Whoever was following them knew about the tunnels, and likely the secret they were about to uncover. As Elliot and Maya prepared to run, the tunnel lights flickered to life, casting long shadows. A deep voice rang out through the underground station. "You shouldn't have come here." Chapter 7. A Chase Through Shadows. The tunnels stretched out before them like a labyrinth of darkness, damp with the scent of earth and old stone. Elliot's breath came in ragged gasps as he and Maya ran, their footsteps echoing through the underground passageways. Their pursuer, the fox, was fast, too fast. "We need to split up," Maya whispered between gulps of air. "We can't outrun him together." Elliot hesitated. "Are you sure?" Maya nodded. "I'll draw him away. You go for the evidence." There was no time to argue. Elliot veered left at the next fork, heart pounding. Maya skidded right, vanishing into the darkness. The fox hesitated for only a second before making his choice. He went after Maya. Maya raced through the tunnel, forcing herself to keep moving despite the burn in her legs. The fox was relentless. She could hear the light, almost casual tap of his footsteps behind her, a predator toying with its prey. She spotted an old wooden beam lying against the tunnel wall and seized it. Spinning on her heel, she swung it with all her might. The fox ducked at the last second, the wood splintering against the wall. Maya took the opportunity to dash into a narrow passageway, hoping to lose him in the twists and turns. Meanwhile, Elliot navigated the tunnels, counting the markings they had noted earlier. He knew exactly where the evidence was hidden. Inside an abandoned storage alcove, tucked behind a false panel. His fingers found the latch, and with a small click the panel popped open, revealing a battered leather satchel. He grabbed it and turned, only to find the fox standing there, panting slightly but still composed. "You're clever," the fox said, his voice as smooth as silk. "But not clever enough." Elliot backed up, clutching the satchel to his chest. "It's over. We have proof now." The fox smiled, a flicker of amusement in his sharp eyes. "Do you? Because from where I stand, you're trapped." Before Elliot could respond, a sharp whistle rang through the tunnels. Maya. It was their emergency signal. Elliot reacted instantly, lunging sideways just as Maya dropped from the ledge above, kicking the fox off balance. He stumbled, giving them just enough time to bolt down the passage. "He's not far behind," Maya warned, glancing over her shoulder. "We just need to reach the exit," Elliot said. "It's not much farther." The fox recovered quickly, his shadow stretching toward them as he pursued. He was gaining ground fast, moving with the grace of someone who had spent a lifetime navigating these tunnels. Then Maya saw it. The old rope pulley system used to transport crates. Without hesitation, she grabbed the rope and slashed at it with a pocket knife. The counterweight dropped, sending a rain of broken crates and debris crashing into the tunnel behind them. Dust filled the air, obscuring their view, but when it settled, the fox was nowhere to be seen. They didn't wait to find out if he was still behind the rubble. They ran until they burst out of a hidden entrance behind an old warehouse. Gasping for breath, Elliot clutched the satchel tighter. "We did it," he said. Maya nodded. "Now let's make sure the world knows the truth." Behind them, deep in the tunnels, the fox stood in the shadows, his lips curling into a knowing smirk. Chapter 8: The Broken Things Society. The city was a restless place, shifting beneath the weight of its own history. Its alleys carried whispers of the past, and its forgotten corners held secrets long buried. It was in one of these places, a derelict railway station, swallowed by time, that they found the Broken Things Society. Elliot and Maya had followed a trail of peculiar clues, small signs that spoke to those who knew how to listen. A clock hand deliberately placed at midnight. A book missing its spine but filled with handwritten annotations. A cracked mirror reflecting not the present but something else, something lost. Each piece had led them here to a rusted iron door beneath the abandoned tracks. "Are you sure about this?" Maya whispered, hesitating before the heavy door. The air smelled of damp earth and machine oil. Elliot nodded, his fingers tracing the engraving on the handle. "Restoration lies in understanding." He pushed it open, and they stepped inside. The room before them was vast, illuminated by golden light spilling from hanging lanterns. The walls were lined with workbenches, each occupied by someone tending to broken artifacts. A woman was meticulously stitching a torn tapestry, her fingers moving as if remembering each thread's history. A man was restoring an old phonograph, his hand steady as he coaxed it back to life. The sound of chisels, brushes, and careful hammering filled the air. It was a place where forgotten things were given another chance. An elderly man, his face etched with years of patience, looked up from repairing an old pocket watch. He studied Elliot and Maya with keen eyes before nodding. "You've come far," he said, "and you seek more than just answers." Maya stepped forward. "We're looking for someone who knows about the Silver Falcon." A hush fell over the room. The name carried weight here, a presence that lingered like the scent of aged paper. A woman rose from her workbench, her dark hair streaked with silver. She moved with the quiet grace of someone who had spent years listening to the stories that objects told. I know of the falcon, she said, and I know what you seek. Elliot and Maya exchanged glances. This was the moment they had been searching for. The woman gestured for them to follow her to a secluded alcove where a long wooden table was covered in blueprints, old maps, and delicate trinkets that had once been important to someone. She ran her fingers over a tarnished emblem, the shape unmistakable, an outstretched falcon with silver inlays. The Silver Falcon was more than a person. It was an idea, a network of those who refused to let the city's past be erased, those who saw value in what others discarded. She looked at them, her gaze searching. What is it you truly seek? Elliot hesitated, then spoke. The truth about what happened to the falcon, about why the city wants to forget. The woman sighed, her fingers tightening around the emblem. Then you must understand this. The falcon was betrayed, not by an outsider, but by one of their own. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Who? The woman shook her head. That I cannot say, but I can show you where it all began. She reached beneath the table and retrieved a weathered leather-bound journal. Opening it, she revealed pages filled with notes, sketches, and codes. She traced a particular passage with her fingertip before turning the book toward them. Elliot read the words aloud. The restoration begins where the city's pulse was severed. The old clock tower, Maya whispered. It hasn't worked in decades. The woman nodded. Find what was left behind, but be careful. There are those who would rather keep the past broken. As Elliot and Maya stepped back into the city night, the weight of the truth pressed against them. The Broken Thing Society had given them a path, but the real challenge lay ahead. The past was not as forgotten as the city pretended, and some secrets refused to stay buried. Chapter 9: Unraveling the Mystery. Elliot paced the length of the library, his hands clasped behind his back, while Maya sat at the long wooden table, her fingers tapping restlessly against the cover of a leather-bound notebook. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a green-shaded desk lamp and the occasional flicker of lightning from the storm outside. They had spent weeks, maybe even months, chasing shadows, uncovering secrets, and piecing together fragments of a puzzle that had eluded them for far too long. But now, as the final pieces slid into place, the realization settled over them like a cold, inescapable fog. The fox has been under our noses this entire time, Maya whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Elliot stopped pacing and turned to face her. Someone close. Someone we trust. His voice was heavy with disbelief. How could we have missed it? Maya exhaled sharply. Because we didn't want to see it. She flipped open the notebook, her eyes scanning the scribbled notes, the newspaper clippings, and the coded messages they had gathered. Each clue had led them closer to the truth, and now the answer was staring them in the face. It all started with the letter. She pointed to the worn piece of parchment that had first arrived at their doorstep, written in elegant but hurried script. The handwriting was slightly off from what we expected. but we ignored it because we assumed it was meant to be cryptic. Elliot nodded. And the fox's ability to stay one step ahead of us, it was because they knew us. They knew our weaknesses, our patterns, our habits. Maya's fingers trembled as she traced a name circled in red ink. It's them, Elliot. It has to be. The silence between them was suffocating. Neither wanted to speak the name aloud. A gust of wind rattled the window, and Elliot inhaled deeply. If we say it, it becomes real. Maya's jaw clenched. It's already real. She grabbed the folder beside her and pulled out the final document, one they had received just hours ago. It was a security footage still, grainy but clear enough. The fox, wearing the distinctive cloak and mask, stepping into a restricted building. Maya slid another paper beside it, an older photo taken years ago. The figure in the image was without a mask, dressed casually, smiling. But the posture, the stance, even the small habitual tilt of the head. Elliot swallowed hard. We trusted them. Maya shut her eyes. And they betrayed us. The weight of the truth settled between them like an anchor. Elliot clenched his fists. We need proof. We need undeniable evidence before we confront them. Maya opened her eyes, her expression fierce. Then let's get it. The hunt was far from over, but now they knew exactly who they were hunting. Chapter 10. A Father's Redemption. Elliot stood atop the courthouse steps, the city's skyline stretching beyond him as the morning sun bathed the stone in gold. The weight of his journey, the sleepless nights, the relentless pursuit of justice, it all culminated in this moment. The truth had finally been unearthed, and today his father's name would be cleared. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, historians, and longtime citizens filled every seat. Among them sat an aging man, his hands folded over his cane, his eyes brimming with anticipation. Elliot met his gaze and nodded. Henry Calloway had spent 2 decades under the shadow of a crime he did not commit, a scandal that had stripped him of his title, his dignity, and nearly his life. Today, that was about to change. Elliot's voice was steady as he presented the final piece of evidence, the original ledger detailing the financial transactions of the Calloway Corporation. The forgery, once used to condemn his father, had been meticulously crafted by Victor Langley, a now disgraced businessman who had wielded power like a weapon. Elliot had uncovered the truth buried deep within archives, forgotten testimonies, and silenced voices. Now there was no denying the reality. His father had been framed, and the city had been deceived. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the judge examined the documents. The prosecution, previously confident, now sat rigid, their arguments crumbling. The lead attorney adjusted his tie, his once assured demeanor faltering under the weight of undeniable truth. The judge's gavel came down. In light of this new and irrefutable evidence, the court hereby overturns the conviction of Henry Calloway and restores his good name. A collective exhale filled the room. Elliot turned to his father, whose frail hands trembled as he reached for his son. Tears lined the old man's face as he whispered, "You did it, Elliot. You brought me back." Elliot clasped his father's hands. "No, Dad. I just reminded the world who you've always been." The city, once content with its distorted history, now faced the weight of its past mistakes. Reports flooded in. Headlines proclaimed the fall of Langley and the rise of the truth. Murals, once defaced in anger, were repainted in honor. Streets named in disgrace were restored to their rightful names. As the weeks passed, the city did more than acknowledge its mistakes. It worked to mend them. The Calloway name, once a whisper of scandal, became a symbol of perseverance and justice. Museums revisited archives, correcting narratives. Schools taught about the case, urging future generations to seek truth rather than blindly accept history as told. Elliot and his father stood before the newly unveiled Calloway Plaza, where a bronze plaque now read, "Henry Calloway, a man of integrity, a father restored." Henry exhaled, his fingers tracing the etching. "I never thought I'd see this day." Elliot smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "You deserved it, Dad. We all do." And as the city reclaimed its lost history, so too did a father reclaim his dignity, and a son find his redemption in the truth.